Hello everybody and welcome to Adobe Live. We would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land in which we are creating and streaming today. We would like to also pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. My name is Flynn. We are live, so if you are in chat, I don't know, I did this. If you are in chat on Behance or over on YouTube, let us know what's going on. So Jung and Gareth in chat, Johanna's in chat as well. Always great to hear from you and where you are. But here we are with Jeremy Lord, artist and illustrator, also from Sydney. What's up?
How's it going? Good to be here.
I'm good. It's good to have you back. It's been a little while. We've got the dress code down pat. It's cold. It's time for hoodies and jumpers here in Sydney. It's raining and it's miserable. So it's time to do some design, do some artwork and hang out together in cozy indoors.
Yeah. Talk about AI, talk about gaming, talk about references and inspiration.
I'm going to get so distracted with gaming stuff. I've got a build over here that I really want to talk to you about, but we'll see if we get there. Yeah, so I think this may have been maybe the first time we've had you on since, certainly since some of the things with AI, Firefly, I think you might have been on once or twice during that time, but I don't know, I can't remember. But we've never really focused and kind of sat down and spoke about it because you're an artist, traditionally trained artist, create digital art, got income coming from art, you teach illustration and design and all that sort of stuff. So it's going to be interesting to kind of unpack like the kind of how your thoughts on AI as we go through, using a little bit of it, the kind of differences in terms and things like that. I think it's going to be lots of fun. If you've got any questions in chat as we're going through, please throw them in as we're going. But we sort of were chatting like, what AI stuff should we do? Let's have a bit of a play around. And you kind of came up with a pretty fun idea, which I'm really excited about.
Yeah, so I think what's interesting here is like, obviously being, as you said, an illustrator, talking about AI in general has been a hot topic and a slightly sort of controversial one, especially in the kind of the illustrator community, where I think Adobe has kind of taken the lead with this is they've made it so that it is kind of, it's copywritten content, it's credit back to the original owners of the images that we're kind of looking at to create this. So there's something really cool with this platform. And I think as well, like, aside from the like, oh, this AI is going to take my job, it's like, well, I don't know. I think there's something really interesting to explore with this, where could it just be a tool that you use to get like fresh ideas potentially, or like do things that you might not have like normally done? And so it's been something that I've been wanting to test for a little while, is this idea of piggybacking on the amount of imagery that AI can generate and the speed at which it can generate it, and the kind of the resulting like huge amount of ideas. Some of them potentially kind of be seen as mistakes, but those mistakes might kind of lead to kind of happy accidents and give you an idea to do something else. So it's been something that I've been wanting to explore, is kind of like using the AI to then kind of as a kind of a basis for inspiration and reference to then create actually my own work and have something that I've made, but assisted by AI, which I think is an interesting concept and a good way, potentially like a positive way to use the AI, I think, in an illustration sense.
Yeah.
Cool. So we're using Firefly today. And I'm going to use this to kind of generate a bunch of random stuff. We'll get a little bit more focused in. We'll get some ideas going from it, do some sketches. And then tomorrow, episode 2, we'll talk about kind of more of the usual stuff that you and I would go through, which is kind of cleaning up line work, adding some color, talking about volumes and that kind of stuff. But yeah, today is super excited to kind of get into this and see where we kind of end up with this.
Cool.
So let's jump straight in. As I say, we're in Firefly. It's a beta at the moment. A bunch of different options that you can kind of do in here. The one that we're looking at is text to image, right? This is your standard kind of like, you write some text, you give the AI a brief of what you want, and it spits out a bunch of different images depending on the settings that you're going to put in. So we've got a text field at the bottom here. And I'm going to go straight in and see kind of how weird we can get with this. one of my friends, when I told them I was doing the stream, said you should have called it the AI of the tiger, which I thought was an interesting kind of pun.
Missed opportunity.
Yeah, so I think I'm going to go with something related with tigery kind of stuff. I'm going to go kind of weird. I'm going to go fat tiger
Like it
sitting in a hot tub. And so let's see what happens when we get that. Right. So we've got art ticked. Obviously, we're kind of looking at trying to do this as kind of artwork. So it's going to help if the image itself is already kind of some kind of illustration, not a photograph.
Yeah.
So we got something like this. Interesting. It's pretty much like bang on what I briefed the AI to do. I'm going to switch it to landscape, and it's going to regenerate some different images. Pretty straightforward. Just a tiger sitting in a hot tub, not really doing anything. Definitely kind of nailed that brief. Let's see what happens if we start adding some different things. So eating a bowl of ramen, maybe. Or could you say noodles? And what's kind of interesting here as well is like the idea of kind of AI. It's been a little bit of a kind of a meme in the Illustrator community of like, for a client to be able to use AI, they'd have to know what they want. They'd have to know what the brief is. So I think we're good.
Right.
And it's kind of funny trying to like write to get the prompts, the text right to get what I want.
Yeah, it's a bit of an interesting artwork in itself,
totally
like trying to
is.
understand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It totally is, of like trying to guess what the thing is going to do and how it's going to kind of create the thing. Like this guy up here in the top left, like he's got a bowl of some kind of noodles, and I like the sauces are just like floating in the hot tub.
Oh,
next to
it's
them.
like Inception. It's like he's also
Totally.
in a ramen bowl.
Yeah.
That's great.
He's got 4 chopsticks, and they're also lit, like they're incense, which is kind of weird.
Oh yeah.
This guy's just gone straight in, no chopsticks. He doesn't have opposable thumbs, so he's just gone right into the bowl. He's also not in the hot tub.
He's not in the hot tub.
Like,
he's outside the hot tub.
interesting. Yeah. So actually, when I'm kind of writing this, like eating a bowl of ramen, I would kind of almost half expect the AI to be like, he's eating the bowl of ramen, like actually eating the bowl itself. So it could, like, there's a few different leaps that it will do. With this, like this one, as you see, is this like he is actually in the bowl of like this noodles and broth in the bath that he's in. So there's a lot of like weird things that can happen here. There's a lot of different stuff that you might not have thought of. For instance, if you were kind of drawing this, is like, oh, cool, I could actually, like, what if he was just in a giant bowl of ramen and he's eating the noodles out of his own hot tub? He doesn't have a bowl. Like that could be kind of fun to work with as well.
But even as like as a concept, as an illustrator, you can almost see it like on a shirt. Like you remember like how threadless shirts and that kind of goofy shirts were becoming just so mainstream and popular. And that's exactly what you would see, like some sort of crazy, weird mashup concept, and then like screen printed onto a t-shirt, and then they'd make like 100,000 of them, and you'd see them all the time. You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
Like just be some concept. Great, that's a great idea. Make it into a shirt, see how many we can sell.
Totally.
But yeah.
Let's change this actually from a hot tub. We're going to change it to an onsen and see if it knows how to do that. And then we're getting rid of the eating a bowl of ramen. Onsen, Japanese cherry blossom tree. See if it can kind of identify what that is. Again, this is just like, we're just messing around, just trying to see where the limits are, get different ideas that we might not have kind of thought of ourselves.
Yeah.
Some interesting stuff there for sure. Like it's hitting the brief to what I've asked it to do to some extent.
He's giant compared to the cherry blossom tree. Like this is like a god.
It's pretty big.
Like some sort of god or demigod situation is what I'm getting, because your camera's almost below it too, to give it that kind of sense of, oh, it's in front of it, but it's just so big.
I quite like this one. I quite like this top right one. It's interesting. Yeah. All right. So that's just a kind of a little bit of a foray into just kind of how to prompt, what we're going to get, what's going to happen when we're doing things. I'm kind of interested in, again, just, as I said, like this idea of the tiger. But I want to get something that's a little bit more kind of what I would normally do. So I want to get like the neon cyberpunky kind of vibes.
Right.
So let's go with Fat Tiger.
Tiger Punk.
Sorry?
I said Tiger Punk. It's like
Fat Tiger
Cyberpunk, but
Punk.
it's Tiger
Yep.
Punk.
All right, cool. Let's go with Punk. Fat Tiger Punk. Riding bike. We'll go neon. Whatever. Let's see what happens.
Sorry, I was just making a pun. I didn't realize that you were typing in.
Oh.
So I was just like, Tiger Punk kind of sounds like Cyberpunk, and that's as much as I thought of it. And yeah, but hey, you know what? We got there.
Hey, we got
what
some
is
good
with
results
the tail floating in the sky?
Wow. So this guy's got a neon tail. This one's just got a bit of his tail just kind of hanging out the back, not attached to him. That's interesting. All right, so I said bike. I guess I need to specify motorbike because us Aussies would probably hear like riding a bike could be a motorbike. So maybe if I say motorbike, it could be a bit more specific to what I want.
Someone suggested try a sumo tiger.
Sumo tiger. Oh, okay. All right.
Let's
see what happens there. Oh, cool. There's some cool stuff happening here for sure. All right. So sumo tiger instead of that tiger, and we'll put in cyberpunk, and maybe we can get rid of neon now. Sumo tiger, cyberpunk, riding motorbike. Interesting.
Let's see how we go. I've been finding it very interesting as well, coming up with, pretty cool.
Yeah.
Oh, you've taken fat off for sure, because it's not to shame or anything, but you know, different build.
So it's we're not getting much sumo in it. But I like the gear that it's put on to some of these, like this kind of like shoulder pads. This guy's wearing like riding boots. Some interesting stuff happening for sure. Cool. So I've actually prepared some of these earlier that I quite like. And we had a few different kind of ideas happening in terms of like what we could do with this. So I had this one kind of like tiger skateboarding. This one's got a skateboard with 6 wheels on either, like awesome. In total. So that, I mean, like, hey, why not, right? That could be interesting to do as well. I quite like the front of the pose here. We got another one where these ones are quite interesting too. Like I like that this one's got the wheels on top of the deck. So like it's a skateboard and he's just kind of riding the wheels on the board. Again, like there's some interesting stuff. Like this guy's got some like visor on. It's kind of interesting.
It's pretty cool. I like to think the one on the right has 2 tech decks. We just can't see the top of the tech decks, and he's riding on a real flat, like normal skateboard as a little ramp.
Totally.
He's just loving it.
And then we've got like something like this. So here's where we can start to kind of mess around with. So I'm going to grab this one. I'm just going to do a quick little screenshot. So I'm using this as kind of inspiration rather than reference. And so let me just drop these in and I'll kind of talk a little bit about what the difference is in between
that was
the two.
going to be my follow-up question, is like where that lies. That's cool. So something I've been finding while you're grabbing these images, something I've been finding really useful is sort of dedicating time to research, like using AI for some of the streams that we've done. I've often had no idea what I was really going to do. I've had a very vague idea of what I kind of wanted to create. And then I've given myself a set time because I really didn't have a lot of time to prepare for a stream. So I have this hard deadline where like we're going live, I've got to have some sort of idea ready, got about an hour to prepare. And I found that forcing myself to kind of only have like 15 minutes, but getting AI to speed that process up, it's been so useful. Yeah. Every single time I've done it, I've come out with a different idea that I started with because it's popped something out. I've gone, oh, actually, maybe this would animate really well. And then it's like, oh, cool, I'll see if we can use AI to create an animation. Well, let's do that live on stream. Let's figure that out. It's something I wouldn't have thought of at all, or I just didn't really have time or kind of purchase to kind of think about.
I think that's it.
The short amount of time that I had, right?
the key factor here is time and how fast it can do it. And yeah, sure, like you can argue until the cows come home about like how efficiently it's doing it or how well it's doing it, or like, oh, these colors don't go well together. Like there's a whole still kind of artistic element to it that needs to be kind of argued over. But what I think is really kind of interesting with this is the potential to even like maybe potentially like briefing clients, right? Like working with a client. Sometimes it can be tricky for me, for instance, to like working with a client and I'm telling them like, all right, how cyberpunk do you want this? And they don't understand, right? So like this guy here is not really cyberpunk at all. He's a bit neon. There's some stuff happening, but he doesn't have any armor on. Whereas like these guys are way more cyberpunk. So it can be something that can be interesting for me to use because it's generated really fast, to use that for a client to explain to them, here's what I mean by more detailed, more realistic, more cyberpunk, less neon, more 80s, like all these different varieties of artwork or settings that I could do. Sometimes in order to like explain that appropriately to a client, I kind of actually almost need to do like 70% of the creative work in order to generate an image to show them what may or may not be the end result. Whereas having this to be like, obviously not final result, but here's what I mean by this is actually really beneficial for like speeding up that process.
Yeah.
So, all right, so we've got a bunch of images here. We're just going to start kind of messing around with sketches. So here's what we're talking about, where we're talking about inspiration versus reference. So as you can see, it's a kind of a running theme with a lot of this kind of generated artwork. Some of the things that I can struggle with sometimes is like hands, for instance, or like this tiger's got way too many toes on his paws. The head of the tiger is pretty good. The ears are it's got a weird telescope on his ear here. The skateboard, as we said, is not like a standard skateboard. So reference is probably not the best place to go in terms of like AI is probably not the best place to go for reference. For reference is how does something look in real life? So I don't know how to draw a hand holding a pencil. I'm going to go and like, maybe I'll take a photo of my own hand holding a pencil and use that as reference. It's like real world stuff of like, here's how to quote unquote correctly draw this thing with the right proportions and shapes and everything so that it looks like the thing I'm trying to make it look like. Inspiration is this stuff, right? Like these tigers are wrong in certain parts. There's some stuff that's kind of weird. It's not really working out. His teeth are a bit weird. He's got too many whiskers. That's not reference for a tiger, but it is inspiration of like, hey, this hoodie here is kind of cool, or this one as well is kind of interesting here. Like this top right one where there's like straps coming out and then there's this kind of like weird neon stuff coming from the hood. His ears are sticking out. These are ideas that you may or may not have had, and they're inspiration. So I think that's a key thing to like set aside here, is this idea of like, we're using this as inspiration, not so much as reference. Yep.
That's great. I like that. I like that like breakdown of the different usage of the two words and like how it impacts you as an artist. And there'll be things in each of these images or most of these images that you're probably like, well, I quite like that. So we'll keep that over there. We can chat about it. We can reference it as we're sketching and stuff. And you might even stray away from it, right? Like it might not make it into the final artwork, but it's to get drawing, to get creative, to get going.
Yeah, to get to get the ideas happening, get something on the page, and then we can kind of quote, like, I guess, fix it for lack of a better word later on, and kind of work with that. That I think there's absolutely massive potential there. And also because we're making, like try and find a reference of a tiger skateboarding. Impossible. Right. So that's not something that you can go like, what does a tiger actually look like if they're skateboarding? You're never going to find an image of that anywhere on the internet that's like, here's what it actually looks like when a tiger skateboards for real. Because we're making this kind of this one I like because it's a little like he's standing on two legs and he's kind of looking like he's potentially kind of pushing the board along. So, you know, same thing. If I'm trying to look for like, what does a tiger look like wearing a hoodie and sunglasses, I'm going to have a hard time finding that reference online.
Yeah, it's a dangerous job being the tiger poser.
Yeah.
Trying to get the tiger to wear the sunnies.
Yeah, so it's important to kind of like set that out from the onset of like, I'm using this as inspiration, and then later on I can, like, if I'm kind of struggling to draw the hoodie, I can try and see, you know, what does a human look like wearing a hoodie, and then I can take some of those parts to kind of like extrapolate that to try and get something that's going to look a little bit more, that's going to say like, okay, yeah, he's wearing a hoodie, that's what that thing is there, a little bit more clearly. But it's effectively, there's quite a lot happening here that I can actually use as is to kind of create the sense of like this tiger is kind of pushing along on the skateboard, and he's got one foot on there. That's good. Again, this one here is a little bit kind of weird. Whoops, I'm on a layer in the back. This foot over here is doing some weird kind of stuff. But there's definitely something I could use there.
Yeah, I feel like the pose is like he's really crouched down and giving it a real, he's like right at the final kick of like push, right? Like his other leg, if it was there, would be fully extended out of the frame. It gives you that sense of motion. Like,
this would be like the kind of the stick figure pose, right? Where it's like that foot is on the board and that guy's like really just kind of done the pushing, right? So that's what we're trying to get to here. And that's what I'm kind of seeing in that pose. That's why it kind of gave me this idea of like, this is the pose that's kind of matching that a little bit more. The head on this guy here is maybe a little bit better because it's not quite so profile. It's a little bit 3/4. So I could potentially use that a little bit more. We'll see how that goes. But at the moment, it really is just like super quick ideation. And I'm probably going to struggle a little bit to get that other paw looking like it's kind of right. Again, because what is right here, like I've got zero reference that I could potentially use for this. And I could potentially look, go and look at tigers jumping, for instance.
Right.
So maybe actually, let me just do that. Right. So let me go on to like normal internet and go.
It's crazy time, isn't it? Let's switch to the normal internet now instead of the AI internet.
Tiger jumping. Give me images of that. And now I'm looking at reference, right? So now I've got like, okay, cool. Here, that's not too bad at all. That's kind of what we're looking for a little bit. That's probably better. There we go. This guy's leg is where it's at. So we can use that, and there we go. It's an Adobe stock image. So you can use it very easily. Bang, bring that in here.
Hey, while we're streaming, everybody, if you've got any questions as we're going along, feel free to throw them in chat over on YouTube, over on Behance. We're here for another 35 minutes for this part, so if you do have any questions, don't be shy. Cool.
That's better. All right. This is where like reference, important to not always just assume that you know how stuff looks.
Right.
It can be easy. Generally speaking, ironically as well, it's like the higher your skill level, the more likely you are to maybe feel a little bit like confident enough, dare I say, overconfident enough to just like go like, oh, I know what a tiger's head looks like. I've drawn a tiger's head before. I'm just going to go ahead and draw it. Where it's like, nah, you need to do your research. You need to do your homework and look into it and see what it actually is going to look like, because you need to get that kind of communicating what it needs to communicate. So there we go.
Yeah, and it's crucial right at the start, like to get that sketch and that composition down correct, or you're going to get to the end, you're going to be colorizing everything and exporting it with perfect settings, and you're like, it's a little bit funny.
Yeah, something's not right here, and I've done all this work and I don't want to fix it. Yeah. And where's this other paw going to be? We could kind of go with what we did before and do something there.
Johanna in chat said, may we all be as humble as every artist drawing a bicycle from memory for the first time.
Oh,
not even artists. So that's like a memory game that they do to prove that, you know, I think I did it in like some corporate thing. They're like, hey, by the way, draw a bicycle, and then no one could do it. And it was something around, how your mind works and how it's kind of tricking you into thinking you know how things work, but you don't.
I always tell my students when we're talking about this kind of topic of using reference and kind of how does stuff actually look versus what you think it looks like. It's the difference in between hearing and listening. Like you can hear something but not listen to it. And it's the difference in between seeing and looking. Like you can look at a thing and then somebody asks you about it and you're like, oh, I don't remember. Like you can look at a car and not know its license plate when you look away. Or might not remember exactly, like, did it have stickers on the bumper or anything like that. Like stuff like that is interesting. It's one of the examples I always use for us Sydney-siders is one of our kind of like probably the most famous monument is the Sydney Opera House. It's something that like everybody has seen. Everybody knows what the Opera House looks like, but it's surprising actually how few people can tell you from memory how many like sales like these things that are on the Opera House, like how many does the Opera House actually have?
Yeah.
Most people get it wrong because like you've seen it, but you've never really you've looked at it, but you've never really seen it. And so you don't necessarily know. So that's where like referencing comes into play because it's like, I can draw the Opera House. It's like, yeah, but you didn't draw it super accurately. Right. Insofar as like accuracy is going to be an important thing for that particular brief, which is not always the case, by the way. So cool. So we've generated a kind of a fun little illustration based on kind of AI and how that can kind of work. Just to kind of get an idea of composition, framing, all that kind of stuff. But what I'd like to do is get to something a little bit kind of more targeted. So I have prepared a few of these guys. So this idea here, so I got Fat Tiger riding bicycles cyberpunk. So we got some really interesting things happening here. I really like this top right one. So that's the one I'm going to use. But
I like the bottom right one, just saying. But they're all good. They're all
like, they've all got something happening in them. I like this one because it reminds me a little bit of kind of like the clown boss in Akira, just kind of like sitting on his bike, a little bit overweight. It's kind of boss. He doesn't need to be riding it. He's just kind of sitting there. He's got a big kind of like cruiser bike as well. It almost looks like a chopper. So there's something interesting there, but there's weird things happening and interesting things happening in all of these. Like I like, for instance, the leap of kind of imagination that AI has done on this one, on the top left one, where it's kind of, I've told it to do a tiger and a bike, so it's done fur on the wheels, which is going to make this guy's riding job really difficult.
It looks like he is really struggling with it. Like it's
he's not having a good time of like riding a furry bicycle.
It's like no grip.
I really like this one as well down here for the kind of the pattern that it's put on the wheels. I'm going to grab that. That's not something that I would have necessarily thought of doing, of like, hey, it's a tiger, so there's a tiger pattern on the wheel kind of, and it's like pink and kind of blue. That's kind of cool. So we're building a little bit of a mood board for this. And in
how's
fact,
the bar in the background? Like, because he's on a chopper motorbike. It's put another bike in the background, and it's put almost like something between like a bar and like a boarded up neon futuristic kind of like you can kind of see the leaps it's making, like with what's going on in the background.
Totally, and it's like this, like obviously he's a biker, so he's got a biker gang, so there should be other bikes in the background maybe, and he's outside of what looks like a bar. So maybe I want to kind of go in. There's a few others here like that I did, with like motorbikes instead of bikes. And this one's got his tail on fire, and there's like smoke, and he's doing a burnout, and there's something interesting happening there. But let's say we went in and kind of did like, I like the idea of a bar, so I'm going to go with cyberpunk bar. I'm probably going to need to say exterior here, because if I just leave it as such, it's probably just going to show me the inside of the bar.
Right.
Maybe. I don't know.
Or will it show you? Who knows? Might show you like a metal bar.
It might do, yeah.
Neon bar. Oh,
cool. There we go. That's not too bad at all. So
cool.
Here, like, like with the one that we've got here, in this one, it's obviously like it's a bar, it's a wall outside the bar. We're not necessarily seeing that it's a bar. And so we might kind of jump to that one, but this one here generating this idea of like, no, it's an outside bar, and like you actually sit, the stools are outside and you sit and you like drink there, and there's an actual bar. Could be something that we might not have thought of, that could be really interesting to kind of work from.
I love that top right one. It's like a candy shop that has 4 sides, but there's all these bars. Like, does that exist anywhere? And if it doesn't, it definitely should.
I suppose like a pool bar would be something like that.
Yeah, it's like a pool bar, exactly.
Yeah.
Imagine just walking
and it's done
past
a little kind of like cityscape in the background. Yeah. There's heaps of interesting stuff happening here that like we could definitely rip from and like take and just go like, sick, let's do that. Is there like a floating chair on the roof? Why not? Some sort of like hover chair. Like all the weird stuff that like, I guess in a sense, like doesn't make sense. So you wouldn't do it, but the AI is just kind of freely generating stuff that it doesn't really know too much about. It's just kind of making assumptions based on images, and therefore it's spitting out really kind of interesting things for you and stuff that you might not have kind of previously thought of. And that's what I think is really cool with this, is this idea that it's like, give me the things I wouldn't have thought of. Give me the stuff that is like, that's weird, but it makes me think of this. It makes me want to do this thing. So I'm going to grab this one. I'm going to use this one as a kind of a basis for this. And I'm going to go ahead and just kind of start building on like a slightly more detailed sketch. And we're going to add stuff. We're going to fix like a few things like this handlebars here. That's like what's happened. This is a pretty like serious accident that he's had on his handlebars. But yeah, there's some weird things like his tail here has got all this like weird stuff hanging off of it for some reason. Why not, right? Could be like he keeps the collection of trophies of like other gang bosses that he's defeated, and he keeps them on his tail, like hanging there. Cool. That's an interesting kind of story to kind of look at that probably wouldn't have occurred to me. Whoops.
Well, they're stretched.
Right. So, let's get stuck into this one and start with the sketch. So sketch brush, I'm using just a standard, I'm using a Wacom, so drawing tablet, right? Should focus on maybe, it used to, anyways. And I've got a standard kind of brush setting here where it's just my sketch brush, where it's just kind of doing a bit of like thinning out, and I've got transfer on the pen pressure too, so that I can get this kind of like light, thin line and then thick, heavy line if I put a little bit more pressure onto it. So that's just kind of my standard kind of sketching brush. And we're going to start with basic shapes, right? We're going to make sure that we're getting everything nice and right. So we're going to start with the main kind of volume of the body, and we're going to simplify things a little bit to make our life a bit easier, and just allow us to kind of focus on the main kind of aspects of this rather than getting into details straight away. And that's just going to make my life a little bit easier moving forward. So we got that, we got his head, and we got an arm here and a shoulder going down into an arm, into a paw, and then the other arm on the other side. Doesn't really matter as much. We got a chest kind of shape, and we can kind of do this a little bit just to kind of show that volume. And then coming down here, we've got another kind of thigh and a very, very short, stunted calf, a knee, and then a foot happening a little bit. And he's got sneakers on. I kind of dig that. I like that.
Yeah.
Saves me having to draw a bunch of toes on a paw. So win-win.
I think AI does that as well. They're like, oh, let's put some mittens on this this person's hand.
Like it's one of those artist things of like, if I can just draw the feet behind grass, then I don't have to draw them at all.
I don't have to draw the feet at all. So there's,
and then I'm drawing everywhere. I'm drawing a setting on the illustration. It's just like, no, he's just sitting in a field. So now I don't have to draw the feet. Win-win. Draw a character with their hands in their pockets, so you don't have to draw hands.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So that's all looking all right. Let's get a hint of a bike in there as well, of just kind of like the frame and perspective of the bike. Sometimes I will do this thing where, let me just swap colors here and get some kind of framework down, where the perspective of this is going to be important, and I want to make sure that I get that kind of, at the bottom it's flat, but because it's kind of coming towards us, the back is a lot smaller. So sometimes it can be good to kind of just get this basic shape, and then within that I can start getting this hint of like these two squares maybe, or rectangles, and then the wheels can fit inside of those too.
Oh, interesting.
Little tip is like, if you're struggling to draw ellipses or circles in perspective, which is definitely a thing that even experienced artists will struggle with, draw it inside of a square, and then a perfect circle will intersect a perfect square. And I'm not drawing a perfect circle, but use your imagination. Everywhere the circle will touch the square is exactly the middle of all those sides. So what we can then do is we can put that in perspective, right? So I can put that square in perspective. That's a lot easier. And then get my middles of all those sides, and then draw a line connecting those, a fluid line, and you will have a pretty damn accurate ellipse based on that.
I didn't know that one.
So it's just one of those things that you can kind of do. Another little kind of cheat that I will do in Photoshop is I will potentially just grab my shape tool here and get I'm pressing shift. Just get a circle, fill it, and then just drop it in perspective, holding down Command, and that will kind of allow me to put it in perspective. So it basically is doing the work for me. And then
you
I
can even see the box on the
reference.
Outside, like when you're doing the transform.
Exactly.
It's exactly what you're talking about.
And it's a win-win. And then I can just kind of trace that ellipse and get it in there looking that way.
Nice.
So a bunch of different ways that can kind of like help you get that looking the way you need it to do. So then we can kind of get a little bit of an easier time. Drawing bikes, as Johanna said earlier, is the trickiness of, you were saying that, sorry, of kind of drawing a bike from memory is just like, man, it's so hard.
Yeah. Well, Johanna mentioned it in chat, but I was chatting about it. But it's so difficult. I don't think I've ever drawn a bicycle that would work in real life.
I'm not sure that this one would either, but who cares? So again, here, this is kind of highlighting the importance of not getting too committed too early to any of your shapes, because the likelihood of them having to change and be tweaked is pretty high. And I think I need to bring this wheel in over a little bit more and potentially kind of get maybe like a backing on his saddle. We're going to get one of those like cool 80s
We want
bikes.
some
Remember those?
support.
Yeah. Did you ever have those bikes in the 80s that had like the big fat like cushiony and it had like an actual back?
Yeah.
Where the seat was, and like potentially you put
Had like a seat.
red...
I feel like it was like a West Coast thing. Like they would put on cruises or something. I don't think they made a lot here in Australia, because I remember really wanting one. Because in all the like the nostalgia for Stranger Things or something, like a lot of bikes in that kind of time had that bike in things like E.T., Extraterrestrial, like
Totally.
a lot of those American movies, you'd see that stuff and then kind of really want something like that. I always wanted a flag at the back of my bike. I don't know why. Must have been one of those
Because it's
movies.
cool, that's why.
Some bigger kid would have just taken it.
Probably.
Interesting, like Gareth is saying, I was taught to draw circles in squares back in school, and Johanna also vaguely remembers that trick as well. Okay, but it's been like 4.5 years of Adobe Live, and I have not seen one person do that trick on Adobe Live. So
it's very
it's
like, you know, basic kind of shape stuff, but it's definitely one of those things that is like I find can help every now and then, definitely.
It's also nice just to think about it, about like even at the back of your head, that you know that that's how something like that would work. That as you maybe you can just freestyle draw it, but in the back of your head you're thinking, if there was a box around it, would the box be at the right perspective? You might very quickly be making those calculations in your brain and go nah, and then erasing it and doing it again and then doing it again and going, yeah, I got it.
Yeah.
If you know, had the hours
I think
in,
that's
like you
where
do.
That's the reason why kind of ellipses a lot of people struggle with, because it's just one of those things that if it doesn't look quite right, or it's too pointy on one side, or it's like it's so many different things that can happen. And like, of course, the first one I draw here is like almost perfect, and that's never going to happen again. While I'm trying to explain how hard it is to draw the thing, I get it right the first time in my life that I get it right first go. But yeah.
It works on live.
All right, cool. So I'm pretty happy with the kind of the overall shape of this sketch. Things that I would do potentially at this stage in order to kind of keep the overall look and feel without necessarily having to redraw too much would be to start thinking about using the Liquify tool. And how that would work is, let me just redraw that kind of foot in there where we can kind of see a knee coming in. There we go. How that would work is this. So I need to go into my filter, Liquify, and that's going to allow me to kind of mess around with stuff without having to necessarily redraw. So I'm using this top tool here, which is the forward warp tool. It's just going to kind of gooify my drawing, and I can kind of push and pull things around. So for instance, maybe this arm I'm feeling is a bit too short. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to untick show backdrop. So show backdrop is a feature that was added in recently, I think, where it shows you the old thing, like it shows you what you had and how much you're changing it, which is really handy in certain scenarios. In this scenario, I'm trying to see it for what it is. So I'm just going to get rid of it.
Like onion skinning in animation or something.
Yeah, exactly. And just trying to get a little bit more kind of clarity on shapes and overall kind of image here, making sure that all of my this is also a good way to kind of fix dents in ellipses, right? If you've got an ellipse and it's like, oh, that one's got a lump in it, you can kind of fix it very easily with this. So it's just a good way to like not have to redraw the whole thing, but keep that sort of like overall feeling in the drawing. And I've just given this tiger just a little bit more oomph on his bike. So this is what it was before, a little bit static, a little bit just kind of, you're not really feeling the weight.
Yeah.
And then this is what it's now. It really feels like he's just kind of sat in there. Yeah.
Nice.
So again, like, I can do this because I'm just really sketching super fast and everything is loose. Once the drawing is cleaned up and the line works are there, doing that is just going to kill your drawing. So definitely important to get the foundations of the drawing down right before you start kind of getting all the details. So let's go ahead and kind of start adding maybe just a little bit more kind of detail. Now that we got the overall structure right, we can start to mess around with kind of a little bit more detail. And then I'll do another kind of like third pass where stuff starts to be even clearer still on this.
Yeah. So using the same like brush and everything, just
at
a
the
bit
moment,
darker,
yeah.
Or a bit pushing.
I'm just putting a little bit more pressure on it, to try and get a little bit more clarity on it, on the line work. And I'm not really kind of doing a separate layer. I could do a separate layer, but again, that's probably just more of like a confidence thing of like, I'm pretty confident that I can get where I want to, without necessarily having to do a separate layer. And then it's going to make my life easier in a minute when I drop the opacity on this. It's just one less layer to kind of drop the opacity on. Let's get the head of the tiger in here. Tiger's heads are really funny to draw. It's just kind of like they're square, like trapezoid, but then there's like a thing, and then there's like ears, and they're flat. So it's like very like specific shape for a feline to kind of get right. So trying to get that right is always something that like I personally quite struggle with. Despite having drawn a few, even done one on stream before with you guys.
That's right.
But yeah,
trying to Lunar New Year thing, or we did that.
Yeah, I think it was Year of the Tiger. Yeah,
must have been Year of the Tiger. There you go.
Yep.
Gareth had one of those bikes. So the bike we were talking about before.
Oh no way, that's right.
Called Riley. Chopper. Probably depends because it's manufactured in the UK and then in America. So it could be Rayleigh or it could be Rayleigh. There you go. Interesting. And yeah, it was in lots of movies. So from 1973 to 1995. So
hold on to that.
The Goonies.
That'd be worth a pretty penny. Yeah, the Goonies. All of them had it in the Goonies, right? They all had that bike.
That must have been what I was thinking of, because I was thinking of a gang of kids going down, and I was obviously thinking of E.T. Not saying they didn't have any E.T., but yeah, that's probably Goonies is probably what I was thinking of. About 5 years in, Gareth broke the frame using it at a BMX park, so I'm sure that was quite some time ago.
Yeah, because they're a riding bike, right? They're not like a tricks like park bike, like a BMX.
Yeah.
Cool. I'm pretty happy with this tiger's head at the moment. We'll probably add a few things later on, but let's kind of continue down with this sketch, seeing kind of where we land on this. In this one, he's wearing a big kind of like cyberpunky suit. I'm kind of vibing maybe a little bit more of like, again, we could go with that kind of hoodie idea that we had before that it was showing us, like that could be that, make it a bit more playful. Or we could go like full like biker dude and have him wearing like a singlet, and then he's got like a big kind of like tat on his shoulder.
Right.
That could be interesting. There's a bunch of different ideas that we could play around with now that we've got this kind of basic shape down and basic idea down. We could kind of mess around with a few different things. I want to keep in line with the cyberpunk vibe of this, and trying to sort of get something a little bit more along those lines. I'm going to hold true to the inspiration that Firefly has given me here, and just add in some just kind of like cyberpunky things. I don't know what these circles are on the shoulder. We can figure that out later, and how they kind of work with this. Potentially he would have like riding goggles around kind of his neck if they're not already on his face, but he's just chilling there, so he's not riding, so he probably doesn't need them on his head right now. And they're just kind of sitting there. Maybe we'll get a little bit more kind of cyberpunky vibes happening on them, like so. And yeah, let's get a little bit more detail down here as well. So we've got kind of jeans happening, big, maybe give him some like knee pads just to show where the knees are going to be. And then again, like it makes sense if he's, you know, if he's a serious and a responsible motorbike rider, he will have knee pads for protection.
Like, and he's got knee pads and no helmet.
Yes.
Got to protect the knees.
Well, again, so that's one of those things, right? It's interesting that you mentioned that, because it's like, I'm drawing a tiger. You recognize a tiger mostly by the head. So if I stick a big, like, if I put him in like a big, I mean, I could potentially try and put like a helmet on him, but it starts to potentially limit the amount of information that I've got to say tiger very quickly. So yeah, there's always a bit of give and take to kind of think about when you're doing this, because it needs to look a certain way and it needs to kind of, you know, be recognizable as a certain thing.
Yeah.
So having that is going to be interesting. Also, having him be in this suit, like this zipper that we've got here, is a really handy thing because it allows me to show the volume of this kind of like ball that is his belly. And so it allows me to kind of, really just showcase the fact that this thing is kind of like having this shape there.
Yeah.
So that's really kind of that's something that I'm probably going to keep, is just kind of like this riding suit. It's also feels a little bit more like Akira, right? So it's like the Kaneda kind of Akira vibe, where he's just got that riding suit. Can give him a bunch of zippers on it on the sides there as well. Some patches, lots and lots of patches, because it's cyberpunk, so there's lots of stickers everywhere. Give him a little bit more of a mean look.
So we've only got a couple of minutes left, maybe 1.5 minutes left, I think, at this stage. Just a reminder for everyone, we will be back tomorrow to finish, we'll get as far as we can, not necessarily finish off, but we'll get as far as feels appropriate tomorrow. We'll continue. Are we continuing on with this with Big Boy here, or the previous one?
I think so, yeah. No, I think we'll carry on with this one and finish him off and keep talking a little bit about kind of referencing and different ideas. Might jump back into Firefly to finish off a few other things, to get
like
some
maybe
ideas
accessories or the environment or something like that.
Yep, totally. Yeah, we'll get back into that bar as well, add in some smoke potentially. But yeah, just trying to get the overall kind of sketched and line work down before we kind of get into the details. Make sure that the main protagonist is looking right, and then we can kind of start to mess around with different things. Might even kind of increase the perspective of that even more.
It's trying to remind me, when you're talking about the helmet, I was trying to think, where have I seen like a tiger with a helmet on before? And it's a lion with a helmet that I've seen before in Sing 2, greatest movie ever animated. And Clay Calloway, he wears a helmet and glasses. I'll send you an image, because it's so funny, because you see stuff like that. It's like the animators must have really struggled with that, because they're like, it's a kid's show, they should be wearing a helmet, but how do we make sure that you can see that it's a lion? A little bit easier with the lion because it has the mane coming out.
Right?
Right. Yeah.
And you need to see his face in order for it to be emotive and expressive as much as possible. It can be really tricky. Like, cool dude with sunglasses is like, yeah, cool, now we don't have to draw his face. But yes, but the face is super handy for me to draw, because it allows me to showcase a whole lot more emotion than not face.
Yeah. Well, we're going to have to pens down, Wacom's down. Unfortunately, Jeremy, we're going to get cut off because we are out of time. Thanks for hanging out with us, everybody. And thanks for the questions. Thanks for all of that sort of stuff. We'll be back at the same time. It's 1 p.m. Sydney tomorrow. More stuff with Jeremy Lord here on Adobe Live. Jeremy, thank you so much for hanging out with us. It's been great fun as always.
Yep. Thanks for having me.
All right. See everyone. Bye.
See you tomorrow.